Hi, I'm Victor Vogel. Welcome to Building a Renaissance Leaders podcast. This is the third podcast we're doing. It's a series we started, so we're welcome you here. If you are joining us, perhaps if you would just enter into the chat on YouTube, you just want to enter into the chat your name and where you're from, and that way we'll know we're live and we're doing well with the chat in that area. We are Zooming, or I mean, not Zooming, we are broadcasting this live on LinkedIn also, although there are some connection problems between the software I use, which is Ecamm, and LinkedIn. I've tried to let everybody know that we can't monitor your chats, but we may be monitoring them via another source. We just won't be able to pull them up live necessarily on this program. And what I would recommend you do is just go over to my website, which is in YouTube, called Building Renaissance Leaders. You go to youtube.com at sign building Renaissance Leaders, and you're going to go into the channel and it'll show that it's live on there. But we're welcoming you to this program. It's going to be an exciting program. We're talking with Dr. Brian Grossman about positive intelligence, one of the three pillars that I am basing my leadership paradigm program on. I want to sort of take just a minute and explain the premise of the podcast. It is not like your normal podcast. It's not meant to be entertaining. It's more of an educational and a familiarization podcast, is how I refer to it. This is sort of aimed at providing you the information that I believe leaders are going to need to master down the road in order to cope with all of the changes, all that's transpiring around us that's changing on an ongoing basis. Uh, as I've done my research and looked back on the history and my 4 decades of developing leaders and multi-billion-dollar corporations all around the world, I'm kind of discovering we've been in a stochastic state, so stuck in the mud, so to speak, is a good way to put it simply. We've been doing the same thing for over 4 decades now. Well, we haven't changed much. We've changed a bit, but we haven't changed enough, and we're not keeping up with what's changing around us. Is what I've discovered in looking at this. When I first came out of, well, I've been in retirement for 17 years, about 2014, 2015, 16, somewhere in there. I just jumped back in. I'm expecting to see all these new things. I'm kind of excited to see what people have done with my profession. And I'm just kind of stunned that we really haven't done much of anything. We're still teaching the same stuff that I was receiving back in the early 1970s, and maybe even a little earlier than that today. It's just repackaged, renamed, but it's pretty much the same stuff. Well, lo and behold, that's not really going to hold up if you start thinking about things like uh, the what's going on with IT, AI, all this stuff. I mean, you look at AI, it's entered into our world. It exploded into our world. It didn't just happen. It exploded into the world, and it it's not just exploded. It's uncontrollably exploded. We don't have any regulations on it. We don't have any way of managing and controlling it. So, this whole premise of this podcast and the series of podcasts that I'm going to be doing over the next 12 months or longer has to do with trying to familiarize people with the topic areas the future leaders are going to have to master and control. And positive intelligence is just one of those really critical elements to this process that we actually, over the 4 decades that I was doing leadership development, we actually missed this. We didn't take time. We spent a lot of time teaching leaders about how to lead through other skill sets like empathy and mastering technical competencies and power bases and things like that. What we have not done, and that, that I can see, and certainly wasn't prevalent while I was in the field, is taking the time to work on the leader themselves, helping them to understand who they are. Are they right for this? Do they feel comfortable? How do you get them to feel good about who they are? And it wasn't until somewhere around the 2000 era and just a little after that, where MRIs came on, neuroscience came into play, cognitive behavior psychologists and performance psychologists. They all started getting together, and they were coming up with ways to identify how people were managing their brain, how they were thinking, by simply running the tests, the examples, the studies that showed how people reacted when you presented certain things certain ways. And now we did that all along. I mean, there's untold experiments. Some of them are kind of interesting. Uh, to show this. And so we were kind of familiar, I think, with the concept, but we didn't quite have our arms around why it was happening. That's what MRI and neuroscience and other things began to really make clear to us, that yes, you can stop how you think and reorient yourself in the process, which would help a leader deal with stress or some sort of emergency situation or difficult situations, etc. So, in that light, one of the things we need to do is rethink about how we think about the role of a leader. We've also outsourced a lot of stuff in development. We've also focused leaders more on task orientations, delivering results, a lot less than when I first came on board, even a lot less about building that sense of community and caring and everybody serving as on the same team kind of concept. And you began to see segmentations of one department become more important than others. All of this was transpiring slowly, gradually, almost unseen over 4 or 5 decades until we've come to um, a scenario where I'm not sure leadership is very well respected. Let me give you an example. Just right here. This is a Gallup research study, and now I want you to understand that I've been spending 4 or 5 years looking at these reports, and so it's not just Gallup. It's Pew, it's Harvard Business Review, it's DDI, it's Fortune, Forbes, just a tremendous amount of professional research people and journalists are basically coming to the same kind of conclusion that I'm presenting here to you uh, from Gallup. And it says here that only 23% of US employees strongly agree that they trust leadership of their organization. And 23% of employees strongly agree that they get the right amount of recognition for the work they do. Now, I want you to think about the study in a different light. Think about over 70% of employees really don't trust their leadership. And over 70% of the employees don't feel like they get the recognition. They don't feel valued in an organization. So if you think about that, just think about that a minute. What we're going to be talking about tonight is just not a nice new leadership thing. It's an absolute, essential, critical mastering skill set that you as a leader need to grasp. so that you can feel comfortable with yourself and making the changes that you need to make. So it's kind of exciting. I feel very good about what we're going to be talking tonight. Uh, what we're going to do with these podcasts is present this kind of information on an ongoing basis. We have other podcasts we're going to be bringing in into the program that we're going to be presenting the our membership base. Now, let me tell you why I chose a membership platform. I've been trying to think how would I get this idea across about a paradigm change and who am I aiming this at? And really, who I'm aiming this at is mid-sized to small companies, to be honest with you. But it's good for large corporations and nonprofits and everybody else. Don't get me wrong. But what some people do not understand in the United States of America, for example, of the registered companies out there, over 95% of them are registered as small or mid-sized corporations. 95%. Now, when we talk about leadership development and you hear about it in the news, you see about it, you read about it, what you discover or what you hear is normally associated with Apple or Google or Facebook or Kaiser Medical Center or General Motors or Ford or Chase Manhattan Bank, or I can name, all of the big monoliths out there, the Amazon, that are large corporations. And so when I was consulting, uh, I don't know, for the 10 or 15 years I was consulting, prior to that, I worked for about 25 years inside those kinds of corporations, uh, Fortune 500 companies. In consulting, when they brought me in, uh, I wasn't on the air. I mean, 1980s, we really hadn't got to the point where you could coach for an hour on air like we're doing here right now. Uh, I was brought in between $300 and $500 an hour to consult with myself and often many more consultants to consult with the organization and changing the culture or changing leadership generally across the company, whatever that might be. And we were in there day in and day out, hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month, and sometimes years after years, working with individuals on site, talking with them, breathing their language, living with them, watching them work, and doing the coaching and consulting and developing them as we go, just almost as if they belong to us, as if we were leading them. And today we're evolving that developmental process. We've sort of outsourced much of that, and we're losing some of the control and some of the intensity of what we need uh, by outsourcing so much. Now, does that mean that outsourcing is what we shouldn't do? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means you need to decide how you're going to effectively develop your leadership from the inside as a corporation. You need to control it, you need to take accountability. You don't want to release accountability to other folks. And that's part of the premise of the new paradigm for development. I think we pretty much outsourced this to the point where people have monetized it. Before, it was an expense. If you were developing somebody in an organization, it was an expense. And so when we started outsourcing it, it became that the organizations began to monetize it. And when they monetized it in the terms of consulting or however you want to call it, you begin to see them standardize things and try to make something to standardize work for everybody. And that it got to the point where people were standardizing and trying to sell the standardization product as opposed to about being concerned about what was right for that company. Now, something like positive intelligence is standardized, but it is also standardized in a way that allows you to customize. It's one of the things that was attractive to me about that process. And uh, so, what we need to do is take a look at redefining the role of leadership in general and redefining how we develop leadership in general and go through that process. These podcasts are really focused on providing some information upfront about some of the things that leaders of the future, I call them Renaissance leaders because we came out of the Dark Ages. You know, everything was stochastic, it was religious, it was, you know, just so structured and you couldn't do things. And all of a sudden we come out and we're studying science, we're studying art, we're studying literature, we're studying music. Everything is creating. People are looking at all the opportunities out there. It was kind of like breathing fresh air and a new light on things. And they call it the Renaissance era. And that's kind of where I think we are now. We got all of that going on in the world right now. Much of it extremely positive, some of it scarier than hell, to be honest with you, but we haven't brought our ability to train and lead leaders, we haven't grown at the same rate that the external world is growing and expanding. And that's a little scary because I don't know that we're going to be able to manage or control all that's going on around us in a way that helps us as an organization. And consequently, we might find ourselves bumping into things or missing things. And so my whole premise, and I put some books together on this. Dare to Become a Renaissance Leader explains why I think we need to change the role and the paradigm role of leadership, along with how we develop leaderships. Then there's I have a small ebook called the new paradigm of selecting leadership, how we go about selecting leadership, not outsourcing this to everybody else, but the company taking, again, accountability and responsibility for bringing their leadership in and not turning it over to somebody else who's going to monetize that process and try to make profit out of it. And the other book there is you're going to find a communication out of the tens of thousands of employees that I have assessed over my career, 40 years. The number one, if not the number one, it's the top three, but mostly it's number one. The number one thing employees say they would like to see their leaders and their organization do better is communicate. And when I asked them, and when we did a follow up, and you do random follow ups and interviews with people, what do you mean by communication? It turns out that's interpersonal communication. It has to do with frequency of contact, it has to do with how they talk to you, it has to do whether they come across as authentic or not as a leader. So these three books are on the market. The communication one is on Amazon. The Dare to Become a Renaissance Leaders on Apple, and the other one I have available that I can send to you through my membership program. But all through this process, this is the issue. This is focused on an operation plan, if you will, an operation plan to help people take a look at leadership, change the paradigm, change how we develop leaders, and start using some of this stuff that's out here that is really good, like positive intelligence, emotional intelligence, and some of the internal communication stuff I'm doing to help leaders get a better handle on being the glue that kind of keeps the organization together. So that's the premise of these podcasts. They're not meant to get thousands and thousands of likes. Some people want that, and that's great, and I hope they get that from participating with us on that. But this is really almost aimed at uh, having a program like a subscription program makes the kind of development that I did for billion-dollar international and domestic corporations affordable through a subscription program. The same way Amazon makes delivering your product in 2 days free. They do that through a subscription program. A whole bunch of YouTube people sell subscription programs. Why? Because people will pay a smaller amount for a period of time and they get the information they need. And they can afford it. And so I got concerned that small businesses and mid-sized businesses and uh, independent entrepreneurs, etc. They struggle with being able to afford $300 to $500 an hour for 8 hours a day. That's you start adding that, calculating that in your mind, it starts adding up to tens of thousands of dollars a week. That's a little over the top for 95% of the businesses in America. So I have the premise, that's my target as the premise is changing this. These are some of the topic areas we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be talking about it with Dr. Brian Grossman, who Dr. Grossman he's an international speaker and a coach, and he has a PhD in psychology. He's a high energy and interactive kind of person. He's a pleasure to talk with. Trust me, you're going to enjoy it, the time we spend together this evening. I hope you do. I want you to relax and enjoy this podcast. I don't want you to be trying to evaluate or trying to figure things out. I just want you to relax and enjoy the conversations. Uh, and really, what he's about is he works with CEOs and leaders to develop their mindsets to optimize their personal and professional performance and their relationships and their connections. And he's worked in the mental health field for, I'm thinking, like 4 decades. And he's discovered that actually we are not our emotions, which is good for me because my emotions have gone to hell, I think. So I'm really excited about the idea. I am not who my emotions are. So please take his advice at face value about me. And when you learn emotional mastery, you can actually embody your authentic self. This this is the core of the leader we need in the future. Understanding your authentic self. That's why this is so powerful and so exciting. Uh, Now he does this by being a speaker and coaching and training and participating in podcasts like this. Anything that can get the information out to people. That's what we've got to do. This is how, to me, this is the real power of social media. It's not replying, it's not posting, it's not memes. It's this podcasting, and particularly the video podcasting, because we can relate. We can see each other and we can relate and deal with that. So he's speaking, he's coaching, he's training, and he is going to help us participate in breaking out of all of those emotional traps we find ourselves in. And he's going to be able to help us understand how to optimize leadership, business, and personal relationships through positive intelligence. If you go back and view a couple of the other, well, the only two, because we just recently started, the only other two podcasts, there's some powerful stuff there. There is the concept of leadership power, and we recommend there are three particular leadership power styles that will build trust and connect trust. And then the other one has to do with harmony and how we can come together and unify. And particularly it was focused around how men and women can see each other not as in an equal perspective but in a harmony perspective where they can optimize. They are different, and according to Dr. Pauline Crawford they're different, and they are different. How do you optimize 55% of the workforce that you may not be doing well? Well, if you think about this program, you think about positive intelligence interfacing with those kinds of dynamics, you begin to build a tool pouch of things that allow you to be a highly effective, authentic leader in the future. So that's why I'm kind of excited to have him on board. So I guess I'm going to quit talking and let's get over. Let me unmute his mic here. And we're going to bring Dr. Grossman on board here. And I would like you, if you don't mind, just to take a minute, Brian, and sort of uh, give us a history. How did you get into all this? Where'd you come from? You don't have to go back to when you were 12, but but I'd like you to just go ahead and give us some insight about your history and what brought you, at least to the point of what took you down this path, and why do you find it exciting?
Well, it's funny you said that, Victor, and good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to share these insights with all of you and answer questions. Um, it's funny you said that right off the top because when I was right around 11 or 12, ninth grade, I decided this is where I'm going. And what I mean by that is my dad was a middleman. He owned a pleating and embroidery factory. And as a kid, I thought I wanted to run the place. And in ninth grade, my brother and dad were playing a game on what's the smallest pleat you can make a material, put it in the steam machine, and have the material still hold it. And at 2 o'clock on a Saturday, I said, "Can we go home? I'm really bored." And they said, "You're not having fun." And I said, "No, I'm not having fun. I stopped having fun about 9 this morning." And we, of course, got there to help organize things for the work week at about 7 in the morning. And so on the way home, my family was driven by education. So if I wasn't going to run the factory, I had to get a strong education. So my dad told me I need to read How to Win Friends and Influence People Saturday night and Sunday morning. And I'll never forget this. He said, "Decide what you're going to do with your life." And I said, "Don't I have till I graduate high school?" And he says, "No, we tried that with your brothers. It doesn't work." And so I got out of that book, and we're taught in personal development and psychology, don't have regrets. And I think don't have regrets that you dwell on and let stop you. But I have a couple of regrets here and there. And one of them is I read How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I took out of that as, wow, you can specialize in mental health and communicate in a way to get people to do things with you or for you in a positive way. And then I read in high school Martin Seligman's book, Learned Optimism. Well, I regret that I didn't take Dale Carnegie's cue and become a billionaire. So there you are. So I went straight through high school, college, and grad school to be a psychologist. I've always been fascinated. How do people interact, look at each other, judge? And my fan, drive has always been, how do you help people take a step up? How can I help people improve? And what really informed that for me is grad school. My postdoc internship was in Rockville, Maryland. We were dealing with underachieving kids, kids who come home from school with D's and F's, but test like geniuses. And their parents are very high powered. They were in Congress and Fortune 150 parents, and just tearing their hair out that their kids are failing. And how do you turn that around? And it's all about the internal self. How do you feel about yourself? Self-esteem, self-confidence. How do you tap into your inner strengths? And so I'm was in psychology for a while. Then I left in the late 90s and worked with a business seminar company and taught leadership, communication, and conflict resolution for years and years. And then went back into psychology, and recently in the last year came into positive intelligence, and it just hit me. So, what is positive intelligence or mental fitness? It is literally, how do you become your authentic best self and handle life's constant curveballs and challenges in a positive mindset rather than a negative mindset? So, we all have these inner critics, these inner emotional wired traps where we have a judge, we have an avoider, we have a pleaser, we have an accomplice, we are hypervigilant, we're controller. And, when I took the assessment with positive intelligence, I was tied for the top three: hypervigilance controller and also pleaser. So, what does that mean? High standards, wanting people to meet expectations, not communicating them well, and then getting angry when I didn't communicate well and people weren't meeting my expectations. And so, what positive intelligence does is help you tap into the other part of your brain where you do master your emotions so that when you know that you're being super critical, super judgmental, or you step into pleaser role where people are walking all over you and you're not getting the outcomes you want, how do you step out of that and make the best outcome? And what I can guarantee everybody listening to this is if you join me in this 6 week process, 6 weeks, 4 times a day for 2 minutes a day, and weekly coaching with me, you will perform better at work, communicate better at home, feel better about yourself. And I guarantee that you'll feel this way in 2 weeks. So you don't have to wait the whole 6 weeks to make growth. And I went through this process with very high stress at my workplace and very high stress with some changes going on in my family. And one night just exploded at everybody at home. They looked at me like I was a monster because I rarely do that. And then I went through this positive intelligence program, and tension went from way up here, way down. I still have life's curveballs, but I handle them different. And Victor, you said something critical, which is the change in the leadership paradigm has to be with us, ourselves, in leadership. Gandhi said,
Yeah.
we have to be the change. And where I've tapped into, how do I help people take a step up, is that's what positive intelligence answers. We become the change. You change
Yes.
the inner you, how you react to things, how you take actions. And so instead of reacting through fear, anxiety, guilt, anger, we react with innovate, empathy, creativity, activate. You're constantly moving in a process of how do you make each situation better?
Yeah.
And wow, do you move through that? So I went on a little rant there.
Oh,
So
that's okay.
right.
I think about that, and you know, every time I talk with you, and every time we talk about the future and what's going on, I think about something different. And what people on the podcast need to understand is that we're not having to start from scratch and rebuild all Renaissance leaders. There are Renaissance leaders working out there. I saw I've seen a couple of things on LinkedIn, for example, from there's a guy who's out there. I think it's Gary Vaynerchuk. He's exciting people. He's bringing people into their authentic self. Some of the things he says, I wonder about, but you can't not listen to him. It's really fun to watch him. And my favorite one he's doing now is where he sits down and just talks just off the cuff with people who come in off the street to talk to him about what has energized. So he's using this in a positive way, and also the guy that formulated Airbnb. There was a segment he had that reminded me a lot of Renaissance thinkers, people who are in fact kind of have it together and thinking in that way, and sometimes they're at odds with the greater whole or the greater masses because they are thinking differently, and that's kind of interesting. I like that thought process, but you're right. It is about changing us, and it's the one thing I think we missed. Like I said, for 4 decades, I don't remember anybody ever asking how I felt about leading or how I could change it. And so I turn to evidence based science and data. Guess what I am? I'm hyper rational. That's I'm like close to off the chart on hyper rational. So if you come in and sit and talk to me about do I enjoy it? What stimulates me? And I'm going, get, I, how do we get the data and get to the point? And to the point where I may even offend you and piss you off, and I actually found myself in consulting roles with major corporation. I had a CEO take me off to the side one time. He said, "Vic, I love what you're saying, but I'm not going to let you in this corporation until you learn how to let other people in and get to know you." And that was early on in my career, and that was like my wake up call from a client. So I was learning so much from my client. I owe so much to my clients that I worked with in terms of where it's taken me. Uh, but there are some Renaissance leaders out there today, and it's those behaviors that come from understanding, like, you're going to know a Renaissance leader when they are comfortable with themselves and emotionally engaged with themselves, which allows them to be emotionally engaged with others. You're going to know them when they use the proper power bases to interrelate and get people excited so that the people empower them to be their leader. That's how trust gets built. It's not you creating trust for your employees. It's when the way you behave allows employees to tell you and grant you the power to be trusted. That's when that really helps from that side. Now, here's what I would like to discuss. So, you're I'm a hyper rational person. So and my by my we have the same secondary one, pleaser, and my granddaughters will attest to that. Every time, like, I'm watching them this week while their parents are away on various things, and I spoil them. I get to spoil them. So it's all about pleasing. No, you can't do this. You got to go to bed. Just 5 more minutes, Granddad. Yeah, okay. I'll give you 5 more minutes. So that's the pleaser. So sometimes I have to sit down and shut my mind down and reorganize my thoughts from and I have my Apple Watch set for like 15 or 20 what we call PQ exercises, I guess, where you just stop what you're doing and you focus and concentrate in a meditative state, and you can talk about. So what I want to do is, so I have this, I'm a hyper vigilant person, so if we have people out there watching this, and if you are watching, please hit the chat so we know you're watching. But if you're not, you're going to see it on the replay, which is where 75% of people see it anyway. But what I'm interested in is, I'm hyper vigilant. I mean, I'm a hyper rational person, and at like a 9.4, and I realize uh, that probably is impacting on how I relate, say, with a client, or I relate with an employee. If I was a leader, I can kind of go back now and remember how I related to some of my employees and their reactions. Um, so if I want to get involved with this positive intelligence, and I come to you, I call you up, I say, hey, Brian, I'd really be excited about getting you to help me with this program. How does that work? Where do we start? What are you going to tell me? How does that work?
How do you start the program, or how do I have you have a little more emotion from your hyper rational
Yeah,
thinking?
yeah, both.
So, so
but
you,
for
you
but
start the
from the
program.
program, no, from the
So
program.
the program works. It's what I love about it is it's in one sense self-driven by you. So you sign up for the Positive Intelligence app. It's on your phone. It can be on your computer, and you practice 4 times a day and uh, 6 days a week, 2 minutes a day, 4 times a day. So what we're going to do with the hyper rational part is use that as a strength for your problem solving, but lessen the negative impact, because when you're hyper rational, you're tuning out other people who may be talking to you through another circuit, which is emotion. And that, simply put, can be people younger than you, can be women. Women interpret generally, and this is not a all or nothing, but generally women take information and put it through their emotion circuit, then logic. men do logic, then maybe emotion. And again, there's parameters in there. So,
If I can interrupt, if you go back and watch January's podcast, exactly what Brian said was what Pauline Crawford was explaining, and so you can see how these connect. But I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just found that interesting. So go ahead.
no, I love her work.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, what happens when we're in our high point of, so if you're hyper rational, if somebody comes to you with a problem, you respond with logic, and your logic may be perfectly sound,
Hmm.
but the other person hears, wow, you don't care, you're not listening, that answer doesn't work for me. And
Hmm.
it's just because of how you're approaching it. And so what happens is when you're stuck in that loop, you just get more and more rational and more frustrated because you're not getting the results you want. And so we shift that by, how do we lessen that rational impact? And usually we're hyper rational because we're ignoring our own emotional fear. The fear of the hyper rational is no one will understand or listen to me.
Okay.
And
Let
so
me
we're
let
going
me
to,
let me ask you a question here before we get too much further into this. So I'm getting you. I'm going to get an app, and with that app, it's going to have a lot of this inside of the literature to kind of help me understand. But at what point and how do I deal with you throughout this process? What your accessibility to me, if I need further explanation about what you mean by what you just said, how does that work?
well, we'll meet once a week, usually for an hour in a group of 3 or 4. It's all confidential, and we're all going through the same steps together, but we all have different scores of our saboteurs. And so we'll talk about that process and how to lessen the impact of where we're really high and make the changes that we want to make. Now, honestly, what's going to happen is you're going to learn to reset your thinking and your emotions, and that's why you'll practice for 2 minutes a day with some specialized exercises. Now, if you're stuck and you need to chat, you send me a text. If I'm with a client, I will get back to you as soon as I have a free moment, and I'll walk you through or talk you through whatever you need. So I'm accessible through this program and as your coach in this process. But not but additionally, what happens is as you practice taking control of, I'll say, these saboteurs, and so the negative impact of those, because you're going to learn to, what does it feel like in your body when you're getting more rational or more judgmental? What are you thinking and feeling, and how do you do a reset? And we will speed up that reset together through the program. Now, what I'm offering is you're going to get the program for 6 weeks. If you sign up for the full program, I'm going to give you access to the app for a year, and you have access to me for coaching for 6 months. And then if you need more access with me, we will set up another agreement. So it's not my expectation that you master everything in 6 weeks. It's my expectation you're going to feel more peace of mind, less stress, more energized, better communication, thinking more clearly in 6 weeks. Absolutely, positively. Haven't had anybody go through the program that hasn't experienced that yet, plus 200,000 others from Stanford University or Shazad Shamin who've
Yeah,
gone through it.
yeah,
Now,
yeah. It's
what
a good
happens is,
base.
because we're human, we're going to take 10 steps forward and maybe one step back. That's why I offer 6 months of coaching with you so that we navigate those minefields together that pop up and that you get the reinforcement to make this an automatic habit.
Well, see, what I find interesting now about this, from the way you're saying it, and that is, if you think about this, what's going on is we're creating a relationship. You guide me through this relationship. And then as we go through the relationship, you, you're helping me see the progress. And as I can see the progress and the reinforcement of that progress, I, I can begin to see what's called an endpoint or an exit strategy. In other words, you're not designed. I remember just off an offshoot, when I left business, I started a personal training program, which I know you do work in that area too with weight loss and everything. Uh, but I started that program, and the one difference that I did is I went with private clients and did the training at home. And trainers and gyms were, they were constantly bad mouthing me and telling me it's not going to work and all that. And it built into a pretty productive little business, more than I wanted, really. Uh, but it was keeping me in shape. But it was letting my client talk. It was as much emotional therapy, not, I wouldn't call it therapy, just dialogue. People just like to talk to you while you're walking or you're running or you're working, resting. But what I went into that program with was 12 weeks. I will work with you for 12 weeks, but you have to learn to read labels. You have to learn to keep your diet under control. You have to show me that you have the desire to be consistent in your exercise routine, etc. And and I will probably know that by the end of 12 weeks. And if you're not doing that, I don't want to spend much more time with you because you're not going to be successful. On the other hand, if we see that you're doing that, you're going to be totally reinforced. And all through those 2 weeks, it's about reinforcing you to sustain or to be resilient after we're done. And then, but you can always come back to me periodically and talk about how you're doing. And, we never ever lost touch with each other as client and trainer. So I kind of see that going on here. Is that kind of the way it works, or?
Well, it can. And so, what I'd like to pride myself on is I think of myself as the uh, antivirus or the vaccine, dare I say. So, I want to come in and train you to be your best consistently. That takes about, well, you'll feel the difference in 6 weeks. We give you access to the program for a year. So, what I usually do is train for 12 weeks, let you go, come back 12 weeks later, work with you for 3 to 4 weeks as needed. But then, if you're in an organization and you want to train other leaders, I help you learn to train other leaders. So, the other component of the training that I offer is I'm going to help you communicate with any personality behavior style
Yeah.
and all the different generations. And so, what I take my real happiness or motivation from is I get you to replicate the training so that after a year
Ah,
of being with me, you know how to do it on your own. But if you want to bring me in to train a new group of people because you don't have the time, but then after I leave that group of leaders, you're already in the system and we're training people in a system that's replicatable over and over and over through multiple generations and multiple personality styles. Because what doesn't change, what has not changed in hundreds of years, is we are emotional beings. What's changed is we don't want to talk about that at work, or we don't want to be touchy feely. We have the people who only want to be interested in the numbers. And what I can guarantee you is when people are functioning at their best, you won't have to worry about productivity or your numbers. They're going to go up. That Gallup poll that you showed, 83% are unhappy. What came to mind when you were talking about that? We just had the Super Bowl. And so I went through just for fun, and those of you listening in will go, wow, he really is a nerd. I went through YouTube to look at commercials from the 80s and 90s. And my favorite commercial from the Super Bowl beyond Apple computers, Macintosh one, was Career Builder. So Career Builder said, "Are you unhappy with your job?" A woman drives into her parking space and she's squeezing the steering wheel hard and just starts screaming. Next scene, the guy's in his cubicle and the boss walks by, taps him on the shoulder, and says, "You're an idiot." And then the other guy gets fired. And, it's like, go to careerbuilder.com. And that level of tension, we've built this mistrust with, why do you want to work from home, or why do you not want to be in the office full time, or why this or why that. And I come down to such a basic. I ask every leader, and I challenge all of you listening to the podcast, if you're frustrated by being a leader, I get it. I'm here to help you lower that tension level and love what you do and manage people so that you love coming to work and dealing with them. On a basic level, I want you to take this challenge. Call 5 random employees, have their job description in front of you, and ask them what their job responsibilities are. If
That's a
they're
good.
not 24 hours old at your company, it's light years from what you think they should be doing, because we don't update job descriptions. And in leadership, we say we don't have the time to explain to them what their job is, or they should know it, and they don't. And when we guess, we make mistakes. And so if we just clarify, what's the job role? When should I come for you for help? When should I not? What are those parameters? When people feel that peace of mind, when they know the game plan, they perform better.
Yeah, that's
They perform
that.
better.
Yeah.
There's just no two ways about it. My challenge in leadership was always answering the question, well, we don't have time for that. And I said, well, do you have time to redo the project over and over?
Hmm.
Because we could stop that project. We can get it right the first time.
Yeah.
We can get it right the first time through communication and figuring out what's going to happen. And then we can deal with, hey, is it right person, right job? And you reminded me of something else, Victor, which is the classic tale in companies and leadership. We take our best salesperson, take them out of the sales role, and put
Hmm.
them in leadership. They have no idea how to lead. They
Hmm.
don't like leading. They like sales. Tech, we take a tech person who is hyper rational, hyper vigilant, loves dealing with the tech part, tolerates dealing with people, and we put them in a people role. It's like, why are we doing that? Now, can I take a salesperson and have them mentor others to improve their sales? I can do that. Can I take the IT person, give them some basic communication training to not be belittling to people, to teach them to understand the tech?
Hmm.
Yes. And then I don't have to remove them. I can still reward them with bonuses. I can do all that, corporate performance stuff. But why take a person who's not in that role? So my personal bias in training and leadership coaching is, in addition to mental fitness and positive intelligence, is what's your style. So I love doing a quick behavioral personality profile to figure out strengths and weaknesses and how you're communicating with these different styles
Hmm.
and mixed generations. We put the whole package together, and that's what really helps people thrive. Do you
You
still
do.
have headaches? You
Yeah.
have headaches, but you don't get rolled over. You don't get stuck in anger, frustration daily and hourly and keep grinding, grinding, grinding. You
Yeah.
actually embrace joy.
You just basically describe my whole premise for the paradigm shift concept. Sort of, if you went back to old days, we would call that reinventing or re-engineering yourself. The difference here between the way we've been doing it, and what we're doing now, is the time that we're actually spending. So if we took what you just said and we modeled it out into how am I going to, as a company, internally create a development program that really works? That means that sales manager that's outstanding in sales you think might be a good vice president or director of marketing, or sales. Maybe it's not marketing, but sales. And you take that person, you take them on the side and says, "Yeah, I'm thinking you have some potential, but this would be leading people. It's a little different than doing it and leading people. Let's take some time, put you in Dr. Grossman's program here in positive intelligence for the next year, and let's work on seeing how we can evolve that. And then at the end of that, let's do some assessing and decide, do you just want to continue to be the top salesman in the organization, or would you really enjoy, and do you have sort of the person, what I call the leadership personality? That is what we have missed for years and years and years in developing people. And it is the difference between simply re-engineering somebody or trying to make them into that mold versus discovering whether they are that mold. That's what excited me about positive intelligence versus all much of the other stuff. And then of course you also just said we have to integrate the things that make that work. My field, interpersonal communication, we don't train that in high school, and by that I mean interpersonal communication is so much more when two people talk than you really understand. You know, how do you create your message? When do you create your message? What are the barriers you're getting away? What happens if you communicate the wrong thing the wrong way? Uh, I have an axiom about communication nobody's arguing me out of, and that is when there's more than one person involved, everything begins and ends with interpersonal communication. Now, I haven't found anything that's ever happened where that doesn't happen. Now, you could be talking to yourself, but if you're talking to yourself, you're probably talking to yourself relative to trying to understand yourself against the environment and other people, and that's interpersonal communication. So that's the other pillar that's part of this triangular pillar I have about interpersonal communication and the importance it plays. The other, of course, is the sociology side, which is closely tied to what you're saying, which is the ability to understand who you are and then authentically present yourself to someone else so that you you don't come across the wrong way. You come into these training programs, people come out of these training programs that they send them for 4 days, a week, or whatever. They come back into the organization, and let's say it's empathy, and perhaps they're exceptionally high rationally oriented and not very emotionally centered like myself. You come back and all of a sudden you try to apply this emotional technique that you saw a video of, you got a definition of in your training course, and you try to apply it, and the employee looks at you and goes, "Who the hell are you? That's not you. I mean, you don't mean that. You don't believe." They don't come across authentic or sincere. And so, when you're developing a leader up front, when you take the time, if this is going to require you and your staff and the people that you work with to identify way out in front people who you think might be good leaders and identify and use this process as a way of verifying it before you put them in the leadership role. Your chances of success exponentially grow when you do it that way. And that's a paradigm. That's one of the paradigm shifts outside of now. I'm not saying don't. Obviously, I'm saying you want to have get help in doing this with folks, but you don't outsource it. I don't like the word outsourcing. I like the word. I want to bring in resources to help into my company, and I will control how I feel that works with you. So I would hire you, and I would say, I'd like to do this through my whole organization, but I want you to help me feel like how we're going to get that. I want to make sure that my people believe that I want to push this and not, I'm just going to send you to Dr. Brian Grossman, you're going to get better, because you're going to come back not very authentic. And in every training program I've ever been in fact, that was my dissertation for my doctorate. I never got to finish because I was doing international travel and family and all. A lot of things got in the way and I just never got back to it. But the thesis was accepted and the research was done. And it was the fact that within a training course, we don't take any time in most training courses to assess people who will more appropriately be able to transfer that into actual behavior in an organization that might be resistant to it, and how to overcome those barriers. There's very few courses I've ever been to that teach you how to do that. They give you the thoughts, they give you the logic, they give you the rationale. Here you go back, you're going to love it. And they go back, and there's total resistance. People will get frustrated, they stop it, and they go back to their old habits. I've heard that so many times from people who were critiquing training and development, uh, and that's not the intent of the trainer. It's just the system we have. It's the process. We've been stuck in the mud, I say, all these years because we monetized it, and it's been a functionally profitable way for people to earn money. But if it's internal and it's not, I'm not getting the results, I'm going to question it, and I want to change it. So that's why I think we need to bring it back in. But the first start is right down this path we're talking about. So just quickly, I want to take a moment and talk about how do you see this impacting leaders role. And in other words, think about a hierarchical structure and the variety of leadership that's within that structure. Uh, how does positive intelligence help leaders cope with their roles? Because there's roles where you're dealing with your employees, there's roles where you're dealing with your boss, there's roles where you're dealing with your peers, there's roles where you're dealing with your vendors and resources. How does positive intelligence help me as a leader begin to kind of use that information to be able to transfer it into something that turns it into a positive, trusting relationship? And what are we building when we do that, so to speak? I don't know, maybe that's too vague for you to, but anyway,
Well,
jump in
here's
and jump in and bring my hyper rational back to reality.
yeah. So take a look at when you can. Everybody listening or watching, go to https bit.ly Brian Brian coach, and take a look at the whole program. And you can book a consult with me or sign right up. And of course, we'll be meeting right away. So Victor, you asked the perfect hyper rational. So here you started our conversation off with this. So this is the key thing that I want people to get. Every 20 to 25 years, there's a change or evolution. So in people skills, personal development, how we know about the brain, and now we know more about the brain and mapping it and how it operates and how it changes than we ever have at any point in our history. And so we started off with Freud, lie down on the couch and talk for 3 hours a day, 4 days a week for 10 years, and maybe there'll be some change. Then therapy evolved. Then we did behavioral. Then it's change your thinking, change your behavior. Your feelings will catch up, cognitive behavioral. And now positive intelligence comes in. And what Shirzad Shamin has created is a system where to take you from your hyper rational or your pleaser or your vigilance or your judge or your accomplice or your victim and rewire your brain circuits. How do you redo the blood flow in your brain? How do you react to these circumstances differently? And when we teach you how to do that, here's what happens. So, to answer your question directly, would you agree with me when people notice that you're doing better, they want to know why and what you're up to? So, what this program does,
Mhm.
and I guarantee it, in 6 weeks, people at home and at work will say, Vic, you're different. You're not as angry, logical, whatever it is. What are you doing? And you can explain it. And so this is what's great about this for an organization. So if I came in and did a training with 20 people, and it's a 100-person organization, you're right, they're going to hit a wall. But if those people keep with me for a year and they are the change, everybody around them will be
Ah,
forced to change how they deal with them.
yes.
And then eventually, in an organization, when you see 20% of the people improving, the boss is going to say, let's get everybody in, and it will work. Now, why the coaching is necessary in the app is what you asked. Well, what happens? Everybody gets stuck. Our judge is going to say, this is a dumb program, don't do it. Your subconscious and unconscious does not like change. It fights change, and so that's why we have 10,000 diet programs. That's why there's 20,000 different leadership programs. What I want all of you listening to this know is very few, maybe three, that I've looked at, and I've been doing this 35 years now, help you rewire your reaction to
Right.
things so that you yourself become proactive. I'll give you a very simple example. My wife is hyper rational, and her ears are going to be burning right now. She'll tell me I'm loading the dishwasher wrong. Now, when I'm on my last nerve ending, I'm going to snap. But now now I'll look at her and say, thank you for that. Would you like to load the dishwasher, or will you let me do it knowing that it won't break the way I'm loading it? And I don't mean that in a sarcastic, mean way, but that's her cue because we
Sure.
have a communication agreement.
Sure.
Okay, if you don't like the way I'm doing it, I'll go do something else, or I'll deal with our grandkids and you load the dishwasher. Rather than my old response would be to go right at her with an insult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't do that anymore. And she doesn't do that with me. We have a simple agreement. She just retired. She was a junior high school counselor. So when we first got together and we were, quote, communicating with each other, I kind of looked at her and I said something, and she said, don't pull that psychotherapy crap with me. Got it. And so we made an agreement. So I said, so if I say to you, can you please rephrase that in your non seventh grader counselor voice to your wife voice? And I'll do the same, not respond in a therapy voice. So we have this agreement where we have a flow now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
communication is easier because we're coming at it from how do we innovate? How do we have empathy for each other? How do we have
Which,
patience for each other? And how do we activate? How do we respond with what's called sage thinking to make things better? With we still have stress, we still have problems, we work through them to solution. And that's what will happen in an organization when everybody's on board on how to communicate well together. You have a flow. And I want leaders to recognize, so think hyper rational. What about the hyper vigilant who can't let go and delegate?
right.
Oh boy, you want to drive Gen Z out of the organization? Micromanage, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a company last week, and they had this weird thing. They had these, all the young people. Well, everybody in the meeting had these on, but all the people in their 20s were glued like this. So you know what I did?
Start texting.
Obviously I had everybody's cell phone. And so I sent them a poll question in the text.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
said, how would you rate the meeting right now? And did you hear Dr. Bryan saying your pay's being cut 10%? Well, everybody lit up like a Christmas tree. Right? And I said,
Yeah.
no, no one's cutting your pay. I said, there's a time to look at your phone, and there's a time where we need this human connection to look at each
Right.
other and resolve
Right.
a problem. And then I asked a fun question, which I never thought I'd ask. I said, how many of you are in your 20s? Half the room raises their hand. I said, how many use your phone as a phone? What? No, we text, we use it for our laptop. I mean, it's
Yeah.
that is a generational thing. Yet they know how to do things technologically. Yeah, I'd like to learn in my free time, but if I can delegate that and they can excel, that's what you
That's the
want in a
way to do
company.
it. Yeah.
And to let go of that control and feel confident that you're doing it for the right reasons, and you don't have that fear, anxiety, and tension. You have the confidence of, I am now stepping into my greatness as a leader. Your number one goal as a leader, it's the only sports analogy I like from sports to business. I don't like it when announcers, run your team like an NFL, run your business like an NFL team. No, you can't really do that. Your goal as a leader is to make everybody around you better.
Right.
That's the singular definition of leadership. Can you make the people around you perform better? Positive intelligence teaches you to do that by having them want to be better with you, and for you to communicate with them in a way of you coming from your best, not this grind and you reacting with our negative selves.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. So that's cool. And what I mean that is exactly why I think communication and interpersonal communication is critical to being successful, and integrates so well with positive intelligence and how positive intelligence integrates with communication. Also, we'll see when we talk about emotional intelligence, it plays the same kind of game, the same kind of role in your life. But it also, I mean, you talked about how we have to have conversations. That's what Pauline Crawford was talking about, the magical conversation that begins to unify people, etc. But also understanding that there is a generation that was raised on that cell phone. My son and I, he's the one that kind of enlightened me to, yeah, I can have a kind of friendship that you're talking about, you have personally online with somebody. And I'm sitting there saying I can't relate to that. And he's going, well, of course you can't, but you would have to learn how to relate to that the same way if you want me to relate to you, I have to also learn where you're coming from. So all of those dynamics were part of the process. So leadership, I can see where I call it in communication we call it by inoculating the organization. So it's the same way I approach consulting when I went in. We did a full organizational assessment. We had all the data. We did the analysis. We compiled the data. We validated the data. We left it in the hands of the executives for a week. We came back and we said, well, what do you think you saw here? And to the letter, the constant phrase that came back to me is, this is a wake up call. I had no damn idea that this was going on. It's almost inevitable. So then they're going, well, how do we get this started? Let's just get everybody down there. And I'm going, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's back up. Let's talk about how we can do this. And this came from my studies about how to transfer knowledge into the organization. You don't do it initially from that side of it. You do it from uh, a smaller context. Let's start in a department and watch this department. Everybody's going to wonder why they're doing it so well. And you want to do that. For one, it's going to cost you less money to do that initially. If it works, you're going to be prepared to pay whatever it takes to take the rest of it. If you don't think it works, we're done. And it's been nice doing business with you. And that worked every time. And it was kind of like you said, it's a vaccination, an inoculation. When one person gets it and protects it against something, everybody else, and the protection gets stronger and stronger. Well, this is the same way. You could call it a viral infection too, where it just spreads like crazy because it's so excited and hosted by so many people. So, whatever theory you decide to take in that process, that's why you want to begin to transfer information. So, these are the kinds of things uh, that we want to make sure. So, if you're trying to get thousands of people engaged in something, you may want to ask yourself, why am I doing this? If you're trying to make millions of dollars, That's probably a pretty good business model. If you're trying to help somebody really become effective and be ongoing effectively and to be resilient and continue that and to help others be effective, to grab what you're doing and learn, you're probably not going to be able to manage thousands and thousands of people at one time, because you're not going to know the impact. You're not going to have that capacity to have that relationship we were just talking about. So that's pretty good stuff we just finished talking about here. And I know we could go on, but uh, here's my takeaway. One, we do need to change how we think about leadership. I think that's a role that we're going to have to change, and we can see how positive intelligence is necessary because you have to understand a lot about yourself to become an effective leader in that line. We can see that the model that Dr. Grossman's talking about is a great model because it engages you. It provides you, it educates you, it makes you participate, but you have access to that feedback when you need it and you work through it. And you start at a smaller rate if you're trying to infuse something into an organization, and make sure that you spend some time doing it right. And then watch other people start wanting to do it themselves. And at that point, you've used what we use the three power bases that I used to say, the expertness, the referent or likable, approachable person that shares transparent information, etc. Those are the kinds of power bases that build trust. And and then competency is the other one. And this kind of stuff yields competencies that tends to begin to impact all of those what we call criterion variables you measure, like efficiency, productivity, turnover, satisfaction levels, engagement levels, like we're seeing, and perception levels of your leadership. So if you went back and did a history on that, I think Gallup does. If you went back and did a history on this, you would see it's been at 30% for decades. This just didn't start with the pandemic, folks. It's been going on forever. So the question is, what do we need to do to turn that around? So instead of keep doing the same thing and promoting and selling the same stuff, we have to we have to stop, almost like you have to stop your saboteur. You have to stop what you're doing and ask yourself, okay, what do I need to change here? And open your mind up to different approaches. And this is where I think Dr. Grossman's positive intelligence. So I'm going to leave the last few words to you. If you can tell people how they can reach you, get in touch with you, and find out more about how you can help them get this on track, I will let you do that for a minute.
Thank you. So again, you can go to bit.ly/dr, BRIAN coach, bit.ly /Dr. Brian Coach. And for those of you listening in that do have a large organization, know that I have a group of trainers and consultants certified in this program. So if you had 10,000 employees or 5,000 employees, we would take several people from each department across the company and start the training so that each group gets the benefit right away. Next thing, I love what you said there, Victor. I'd like all of you to wonder, just ask, if I have high turnover, what would the outcome be if I stopped that? If I had great workforce retention, if I created the workforce where people wanted to be in this environment and work, and they started referring friends to come in, you can have that type of business and company. It's quite possible in even in this job environment. So simply put, let's just start with you. If you want to be at peak performance, make decisions from a peace of mind thinking level rather than a survival thinking level, positive intelligence mental fitness is for you. So you get to peak performance, making sound decisions, better relationships, and better communication. I know it works based on the research and 25 years of factor analysis. I know it works because it worked on me, but it worked on my family without them going through anything. And so uh, let's just you could go to that website and book a consultation with me. We'll have a no pressure chat and see if this is for you. Um, I hope it is, but I'm not one of those sales guys that's going to rope you into something that 2 weeks later you're not going to like. I will guarantee you this: sign up, and in 2 weeks, if you and I know because I have access to your app, not confidential parts of it, but I know if you're doing the exercises. If you do the exercises 4 times a day for 2 weeks and you don't feel significantly better, I'll give you your money back. No questions asked, but I haven't had anybody do that yet.
I
So
wouldn't
we'll
do
go from there.
that.
And then in
That's my hyper rational.
there you go. And in today's work environment, we're navigating these
Yeah.
choppy waters. Here's what it comes down to: when you start performing at your best, it's transferable and contagious.
Yeah.
Other people around you will start performing better, and it grows and it's motivational and people start thriving, and it's fun to come to work to handle the challenges of work rather than the headache of, and dare I use you as an example, it's like my wife used to say, why are you bringing Vic home to dinner? I said,
Yeah.
he's not here. She says, you've been talking about him for an hour.
Yeah.
Leave him at work.
Yeah.
You will let go of all of that. You will learn how to deal with the negative, difficult people at work easily. I promise you.
That's
So
good. Well, I appreciate the time you put in. I'm sure this is a lot of positive information for people. Again, this is aimed at giving leaders the stuff that they need to start thinking about if they're going to be leaders in the future and the oncoming onslaught of all the change and the horrific change and all the negativity that's in the world now. There's a way to cope with that with this, which is very exciting. But it will help leaders become more authentic, become more effective. Consequently, you're going to get your employees empowering you to be effective. So, Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us this evening. And please contact Brian, get to him, and all of this information, contacts, and further information will be in the description that goes along with this. This will be broken down into chapters, so you'll be able to look at it time and I would encourage you to look at it more than once, maybe 2 or 3 times, because you're going to walk away with a little something you didn't discover the first time that you watched a program like this. So that's the idea of this podcast, is to start providing you familiarization and knowledge and get your thinking going in this realm. So Brian, we'll let you go, and I hope to see you later, and stay in touch, and thank you very much for being here.
thank you for your time and thank you for letting me share this information.
Sure.
Take care.
Yeah, well, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, internal interpersonal communication, assessments, and dynamics of assessing organization, a lot of other topics in the upcoming podcast. So you're going to want to stay tuned to that. Uh, we are, in fact, on a subscription basis again. This is done through Buy Me a Coffee, so you can just go in there and take a picture of that, or else just hold your phone up. It'll send you to the website, and you can come on. You can see how that works. Some of the extra things that we provide people who become Renaissance Leader memberships, and again, this prescription thing is aimed at the small business person, or the person who wants to be a leader and coming out of college or whatever, and they just are struggling getting into a role of leadership. These kinds of the availability of this kind of information will begin to give you some of the insights and some of the means for talking. I mean, we're probably going to even be talking in small group sessions with business managers and leaders, just asking them what their pain points are. These are like dialogue, 3 or 4 people at a time, and occasionally somebody like Brian might want to join us. And but But from that information, we can take and find out what we need to provide you in the future that will guide you in this right direction. So there's this familiarization phase, which is this podcast, and the other podcasts are feedbacks and information collection that are going to guide our way and show us how to overcome the barriers that get in our way to becoming more effective leaders than we have been in the past, that are kind of leaving us where we are now. And a lot of people are not looking at leadership, as you can tell, in a positive light. And you don't have to look much farther than the government and a few other things to see the dysfunctionality out there in leadership. That all has to change. It has to change if we're going to sustain. It doesn't mean you're not going to make more money, but to sustain, to be resilient, to still be here later. And keep in mind, remember, 95% of those people are small businesses, and most of them fail in their, or a lot of them fail in their first year, and even more fail in their 5 and 10 year factor. So there are a lot of businesses not being the Amazons, not being the startup and our failures, and they hire the vast majority of people out in our community. I want you to keep that in mind as you talk about this. We want to focus on those folks more than we want to focus on the Amazons. They're going to be successful because they're applying many of the dynamics, but some of them already come with pre-established resources to do that. And you're a small business guy, you're a plumber, and you start out and things are good. And the next thing you know, you have 15 trucks out there, and you start stumbling because you have a hard time managing those 15 people. That's the person who I'm hoping we're going to grab a hold of. The restaurant manager on Main Street, the bar that opens up that everybody goes to and loves, but for some reason just can't sustain. They're not resilient. And I saw this so much. I got this idea as I was in Brighton, Michigan, and everything. This great little suburb, 40 miles west of Detroit, where a lot of the executives for the auto industry. And they have a main street, and everything you could possibly want is on that main street. High-end stores, great lounges, great restaurants. They close it off every Saturday, and everybody has a party on the street in the whole town. Uh, and I started getting in there, and I'm and talking with these people about what makes them successful, doesn't make them, but they don't have access to a lot of this kind of information that would make them even more successful and even more available. And so when you see a shop close down, you it's kind of painful, and you want to stop that kind of stuff. You want to see people be successful down the road. So that's the subscription program. If you sign up, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. But we're going to be doing some more stuff, but more importantly, we're going to try to be getting some information back with you in that subscription side. And I would encourage you to go pick up these books and read them. Becoming a Renaissance. These are easy. Ebooks. Some of them have videos in them. Some of them have links to places. I do everything on an ebook basis now because you can do that. You have the, and you can take it out, and you have the resource right there in your hand. You can go read this segment, and you can go look at this link before you go into your employee behavioral assessment meeting, uh, and conduct it correctly. So it's all available to you that way on that subscription basis. These books are, like I say, the communication books on Amazon, the Becoming Renaissance Leaders on Apple Books, and the other one, if you email me, I can get you a copy of that book about how to, which we talked about today, how you develop that kind of stuff. So all of that is kind of available to us. Uh, and of course, as we're going through all of this stuff, I want you to subscribe and do the standard YouTube thing. Subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you see when these things are coming up. And hopefully, LinkedIn and Ecamm will come to some agreement, and we can begin to bring them into this format. Until then, I primarily use YouTube, and that's where you can see a lot of these videos is on my channel right now. So I hope you enjoy this. Please get in touch with Dr. Grossman if you're interested in these programs. He's a great guy. He is one of those people who will help you be successful and help you inoculate the rest of your organization successfully. So I'm going to let you go, and I any comments you have, please put them in the comments section, and I will try to get to them as soon as possible. Please spread the word about our podcast. It is new. I understand it's new. As people begin to see who we are and what we're about, I think it'll grow. And from there, possibly we'll start things like communities and group communities and things like that where people can share information. And we see how powerful groups are in positive intelligence. So uh, until next time, I'm Victor Vogel. This is Building Renaissance Leaders, and I appreciate you being here. Be safe and look at being authentic yourself.